The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 611. Woo. Meteor. The stone lion flew towards Charlie and the others. Still immersed in shock, they were stunned to see the stone lion flying towards them. Get out of the way, Faber reacted quickly. As he shouted, he released all his energy, pushing everyone around him away while also dodging himself. People screamed as they were flung away by his force. Boom! A sound like an earthquake erupted, with dust flying and filling the air. Beep, beep. Hundreds of car alarms in the parking lot sounded due to the severe shaking. Charlie and the others looked at the stone lion, head down, half buried in the ground. They felt the hair on their backs stand on end as if countless thorns were pricking them, almost scaring their souls away. Some of the faint-hearted even wet themselves. Looking at Kiran, standing proudly, many had only one thought in their minds. Is he even human? Joe's eyes blinked, his mouth opened but no words came out. Suddenly, he felt like Kiran before him was a terrifying demon. Yes, a terrifying demon, so horrifying that he felt he might be scared to death. Looking at Kiran, they were dumbstruck, no longer arrogant. Only Faber knew that this was just the appetizer for Kiran. A person who could shatter ghosts, what was a stone lion to him? The more he thought about it, the more despair he felt, his heart seemingly about to break. Looking at the courtyard of the Lions Club, he had a moment of solemn realization. Was the Lions Club really going to be destroyed? Would it be annihilated like Panthergate and Wolfgate? A deathly silence fell on the place. The happiest was the healing prince, feeling like he had hit the jackpot by following the right person. Kiran was incredible. Thinking that this was his master and boss, he wanted to kneel in worship. Oh my! It took a full minute before someone finally reacted, screaming in horror. This scream, like a domino, caused many hearts to tremble violently, some even crying. They were terrified of Kiran. They did not have bodies as sturdy as the stone lion. They did not have heavy bodies like the stone lion. If Kiran slapped them, they might crumble. If Kiran threw them, they might meet the ground beneath. Kiran was monstrously abnormal. Terrifying to the extreme. Your life is mine, the healing prince suddenly declared loudly. His voice resonated, filled with pride and dominance. Instead of getting angry, the crowd shivered at his words, instinctively turning their gaze towards Kiran. Kiran didn't speak. Instead, he turned around, hands clasped behind his back, and looked towards the interior of the Lions Club. The crowd simultaneously gulped. They felt death. Charlie's face turned ashen. His tall frame trembled slightly. The thought that they could fight Kiran with their combined strength had completely vanished. Kiran's presence struck terror in his heart. Facing Kiran, he had no confidence at all. We will give money, Charlie managed to squeeze out the words in humiliation. Sigh. The people of the Lions Club breathed a sigh of relief, as if they had just snatched their lives back from the jaws of death. Sir, the healing prince turned to Kiran, seeking his decision. 200 billion for these people's lives for the next 6 days. Kiran turned, looking at Charlie and the others. In 6 days, I will still come to eliminate Liongate. Liongate. Kiran wasn't talking about the Lions Club, but emphasized the word Liongate heavily, as if laden with endless hatred. The crowd was so frightened that they immediately shut up, not daring to say a word, all turning their gaze towards Charlie. The confidence previously seen on Charlie's face had vanished. He looked at Joe. Go get the money! Huh? Joe snapped back to reality, not objecting, but instead nodding hurriedly. Okay. He ran towards the inside, occasionally looking back at Kiran. As the elder of the Lions Club managing the underworld and primarily responsible for making money, Joe also oversaw the finances. This explained his initial outburst upon hearing the suggestion to give money. But now his attitude had changed. In less than 10 minutes, Joe presented a check for 200 billion to Kiran. His slight frame trembled, his small eyes darted around, and his face bore a look of pleading. Kiran raised an eyebrow slightly. I don't want to go through the trouble of cashing a check. I will accompany Mr. Kiran to cash it, Joe quickly offered. Kiran nodded in approval. As if granted a pardon, Joe breathed a sigh of relief and respectfully invited Kiran towards a luxurious Lincoln car. Kiran, accompanied by the healing prince, got into the car. Joe drove Kiran to the bank himself. Watching him leave, many felt as if they had walked back from the brink of death, completely relaxing and collapsing to the ground. Charlie watched Kiran intently, unsure of Kiran's intentions. Was it really just about the money? Faber felt that Kiran wasn't after the money. To Kiran, money couldn't wash away the blood feud of his family. Why then? Kiran looked out of the window. Some people in the Lions Club had already been poisoned, and some people were scared out of their wits. If people still insisted on staying in the Lions Club, they deserved to die. When the 7-day promise was fulfilled, it would be the time to send these people to the guillotine. He was actually giving these people a way out, giving them time to choose. Kiran hated the Imperial Dragon, but he knew that some people didn't necessarily deserve to die. He couldn't really start a massacre. Damned people, they were going to die! Kiran asking for money was a warning. However, many people could not understand. Seeing Kiran silent, Joe felt even more terrified of him. Now thinking back to his own insults towards Kiran and not being punished, he felt somewhat fortunate. He drove to the main branch of Fawkes City Industrial Bank. After parking, he respectfully said to Kiran, "Mr. Kiran, we've arrived." Kiran didn't speak but handed the bank card to the Healing Prince. "Go handle it." "Yes," the Healing Prince responded, stepping out of the car with Joe and walking confidently towards the bank. Kiran was about to rest when he suddenly noticed two familiar figures, Lucia Jensen and Bianca Campbell. Watching the backs of the two women, Kiran shook his head silently. A woman can be crucial to a family's fortune. Sometimes a woman can lead to both success and downfall. Lucia was Archie Campbell's biggest failure. Yet Kiran pondered another issue. Wasn't his own family also ruined because of his mother Zara Yanis's identity? He couldn't untangle the grievances of his past life. But in this life, he wanted to love Snow dearly to support the future of the York family. Thinking of Snow, Kiran suddenly realized how much he missed her. "Where's Kiran?" Bianca Campbell's questioning voice to the Healing Prince suddenly came from outside. Chapter. Kiran was momentarily stunned, then opened his eyes and looked outside the car. Bianca turned to her mother. "Mom, this man is called the Healing Prince, Kiran's lackey. If he's here, Kiran must be here too." Humph. Hearing this, Lucia scoffed coldly and glared at the Healing Prince. "Tell that little brat Kiran to come out here." The Healing Prince, hearing these insults towards Kiran from the mother and daughter, was about to lose his temper when Kiran's voice rang out. "Aunt Lucia." "Bianca." He had already exited the car and was walking over. Lucia and Bianca did not see Kiran get out of the luxurious Lincoln. Seeing Kiran's calm and composed demeanor made their anger towards him even fiercer. Lucia rushed over, fuming. "Kiran, have you no shame?" "What shame?" Kiran asked in bewilderment, genuinely surprised by the accusation. You deliberately made Bianca score the lowest today and used the so-called hidden rules to make Starly White, who calls you Brother Kiran, score the highest. If you wanted to retaliate against us, you could have just said so. Although Lucia had consoled Bianca, she was still furious. Her daughter was beautiful and talented, a well-known live streamer. How could she have scored the lowest? The mention of hidden rules naturally led to her outburst upon seeing Kiran. When Kiran heard about this, he recalled that he had already arranged for all of them to be admitted just so Bianca Campbell could enter as well. He did not expect the other party to berate him so arrogantly. He was speechless. Seeing Kiran's silence, Lucia thought he was admitting guilt and haughtily said, "Kiran, let me tell you, even if Bianca isn't admitted, we're not afraid." Bianca snorted coldly at Kiran. "With iron fans like Lord of the Sea supporting me, making millions every day, I couldn't care less about you." Lucia's face was full of pride and she scoffed at Kiran. "Let me tell you, my daughter is a fairy. You, a mere toad, will never get to enjoy her." Their loud argument and taunts attracted many onlookers. The Healing Prince, realizing they knew each other, didn't dare to speak up. Joe frowned, puzzled by the situation between Lucia and her daughter. Kiran turned to the Healing Prince. "Get to work." "Yes." The Healing Prince hurriedly complied and walked away from the crowd. Seeing Kiran not responding, Lucia pointed at him. "Feeling guilty, aren't you?" "I'm telling you, Kiran, you'll never be worthy of entering the Campbell family's door again." She became somewhat excited and, seeing the crowd, grew even more arrogant. Opening her purse, she pulled out a check for 100 billion given by the Silver Lions Club, waving it around. "See this? Even the Silver Lions Club is paying us, and it's 10 billion. At that moment, she seemed to forget that it was apology money from Clive Craigar to Kiran. Lucia's arrogance shocked many onlookers. Some couldn't help but exclaim, "Money from the Silver Lions Club? Isn't the Silver Lions Club known for collecting money? How could they give away 100 billion? Who are they? They must be quite powerful." Hearing the crowd's discussions, Lucia's mouth curled into a proud smile. She stood tall and declared, "I am the wife of the CEO of Campbell Corporation. Campbell Corporation is a major company in Fawkes City worth billions. No wonder they're so impressive. It seems that Campbell Corporation is highly regarded by the Silver Lions Club." The discussions continued, fueled by Lucia's words. She was over the moon with delight, pointing at her daughter Bianca. "Kiran, forget about courting our Campbell family's precious daughter. dreaming of entering our family and getting our wealth. Give up on those delusions. Waving the check, she declared, "This is more money than you'll ever earn or possess in your lifetime." Lucia's arrogance knew no bounds, as if she were a deity dictating fate. In her eyes, Kiran was less than nothing. Before Kiran could speak, Joe couldn't bear to listen any longer, appalled by her boastfulness. Considering the Campbell Corporation annually paid protection money to the Lions Club, her bragging was absurd. He suddenly stepped forward and snatched the check from Lucia's hand. "What are you doing?" Lucia couldn't help but shout angrily as she saw her check being taken. With a swift motion, Joe tore the check into pieces. Lucia's mind buzzed, her 10 billion gone just like that. Her rage soared. You bastard! How dare you tear up my money?" She roared and charged at Joe. Slap! Joe threw the torn check pieces onto Lucia's face. His martial arts skills, though modest compared to Kiran, were enough to send the pieces of paper flying at Lucia. She felt as if she had been hit by a high-speed rail. "Ow!" Lucia howled in pain. "Mom!" Bianca shouted, rushing to help Lucia up while angrily glaring at Joe. "You tore up our check. I'm calling the police to arrest you." "Right! Call the police, and we'll sue him for assault," Lucia joined in shouting. "Go ahead, tell the police my name is Joe Queen," he said, unfazed and even introducing himself. "You know what's good for you," Lucia, not recognizing Joe, responded viciously. "And tell them I'm the vice president of the Lions Club," Joe continued. "The Lions Club's vice president? You. Wait, who are you?" Lucia's voice trembled as she halted midway through her sentence. She saw Bianca dialing the emergency number and hastily reached to grab the phone, but it was too late. "Police. Hello! Sorry, we dialed by mistake." Lucia quickly took Bianca's phone, apologizing to the operator. Hearing it was a misdial, the dispatcher scolded Lucia, who repeatedly apologized. Her earlier arrogance evaporated. Hanging up, Lucia was sweating coldly, her gaze filled with fear as she looked at the still angry Joe, hastily putting on a smile. "Mr. Queen, the Silver Lions Club is under my management." Joe ignored Lucia's nervous attempts to appease him. The leader of the Silver Lions Club? Wasn't that practically the boss? Lucia regretted her flamboyance, her head feeling heavier by the moment. What a mess. What a tragedy. Her 10 billion was gone, and now she hoped Joe wouldn't be too angry, or the consequences would be unimaginable. She silently blamed herself for her misfortune, thinking it was all because she tried to show off in front of Kiran. Her anger instantly redirected towards Kiran. "Kiran, this is all your fault. You owe me 10 billion or I'll never let this go. I want..." Slap. Joe stepped forward and delivered a slap. "You want what?" Chapter 613. Lucia was dumbfounded, unable to comprehend why Joe Queen would step in to defend Kiran by striking her. What was happening? Hadn't the Silver Lions Club people knelt and apologized to Kiran the night before? They were humiliated. Were they not angry? Did they not harbor resentment towards Kiran? Moreover, with Kiran, intent on destroying the Lions Club, why would anyone seek to curry favor with him? The logic was beyond her. Joe's face was icy as he hoped Kiran wouldn't be angry and would forgive him. He recognized his previous arrogance had brought him to the brink of deserving death. He was eager to make a good impression in front of Kiran, hoping to gain favor. In Joe's eyes, anyone daring to insult Kiran was courting death, for Kiran held the power of life and death over them. Seeing her mother struck, Bianca dared not utter a word once she knew who Joe was. Kiran looked upon the mother and daughter with disdain, particularly disappointed in Bianca for her lack of filial piety. Seeing her mother attacked, a daughter should fight back with all her might. Yet, Bianca showed no reaction, a stark contrast to Snow Xander. However, thinking of Archie Campbell softened his heart. Each person's destiny is their own. Thankfully, they're not my concern. They're merely passers-by, Kiran thought. Kiran turned to Joe and said indifferently, "Kneel and apologize." Kneel? Apologize? Kiran's words echoed like thunder, shocking everyone present. To have the Lions Club's vice president kneel and apologize. How was that possible? Especially since Joe was helping him? It was inconceivable. Fearing the consequences of Joe kneeling to apologize to her, and the possibility of retaliation, Lucia hastily declined. "No, no need." "Kiran, are you trying to kill my family?" Bianca furiously stamped her foot and scolded Kiran. Thump. Suddenly, Joe knelt before Lucia, apologizing. "I'm sorry." Then he slapped himself twice. This scene stunned everyone present. Not only had he knelt, but also struck himself. A sight beyond imagination. Lucia stood there, mouth agape wide enough to fit an egg, completely astonished. Bianca turned pale, as if she had glimpsed imminent danger. "Give them the 10 billion as before," Kiran instructed Joe casually. "Yes," Joe, still kneeling, obediently agreed. Kiran turned to Lucia. Aunt Lucia, I'll say it again. I've never thought of coming to your house as a suitor, and Bianca is not the woman I desire. Lucia and Bianca felt their faces burning upon hearing these words, as if slapped publicly, especially realizing that the 10 billion was essentially given by Kiran. Ha! Bianca was the first to regain her composure, scoffing at Kiran. I wouldn't fancy you either. The man I desire is someone outstanding like Lord of the Sea, not a nobody like you. Despite Kiran's strength and ability to make Joe kneel, he was still worthless in her eyes. The man Bianca admired could easily spend a fortune, while Kiran was nothing but brawn over brain, she consoled herself. Kiran couldn't be bothered to explain to the mother and daughter, turning away to leave the crowd. Lucia and Bianca hurriedly approached Joe, plastering smiles on their faces. Vice President Queen, please, get up, we. Humph. Joe stood up, cutting them off with a cold snort. Lucia and Bianca, shivering, were about to kneel to Joe in apology when suddenly a force seemed to hold them up, preventing them from kneeling. They were startled, quickly turning to see Kiran intervening. Their gazes swiftly filled with anger, believing Kiran's action was to exacerbate the conflict with the Lions Club. Not allowing you to kneel is out of respect for Uncle Campbell, Kiran said, then walked away for good. Out of respect for Uncle Campbell, Lucia and Bianca felt conflicted. Was it really because of gratitude towards Archie Campbell? Was Kiran really that powerful? However, both women quickly returned to their state of annoyance. Why should Kiran be powerful? Kiran, I just despise you, Bianca shouted angrily, striding away. Her heart yearned for Lord of the Sea to step forward and humiliate Kiran. She took out her phone, repeatedly trying to add Lord of the Sea as a friend. Lucia also wanted to leave, but remembering the 10 billion, she looked at Joe with a fawning smile. Come inside, Joe said proudly, heading inside. Lucia followed, her demeanor like a groveling dog, utterly humiliating. Money had blinded her. Money made her willing to kneel. From start to finish, Lucia's actions baffled many but mostly drew disdain. For the sake of money, she had lost all dignity. Kiran left and went to Mysticor Enterprise. Entering Shuri's office, he found her admiring men's clothing as if they were treasures. Seeing Kiran, Shuri blushed, her eyes misting over. Mr. Kiran, these are for you. Thank you. Kiran thought of Snow Xander, yearning to return to her side soon. Would you try them on? Shuri asked tentatively. Kiran nodded and began changing, eventually standing in his underwear. Shuri's eyes sparkled at Kiran's robust, masculine body, her hands trembling with the urge to touch him. Kiran, oblivious to her turmoil, simply dressed. Shuri, though nervous, rushed to help him with the clothes, her actions tender and wifelike. Dressed, Kiran admired his sharp appearance in the mirror, a smile crossing his face. That smile was a first for Shuri, making her heart swell. Mr. Kiran, may I wash your hair? Looking at his dusty hair, especially noticeable against his white suit, he declined. I'll shower when I get home. How about I pick you up at 6 from Fawkes Hill Villa? She offered. No need, I'll manage, Kiran replied. All right then, she nodded, still smiling. Kiran left Mysticor Enterprise for Fawkes Hill Villa. Not seeing Yvonne and thinking she had gone out, he removed his clothes and went to the bathroom. His eyes were filled with shock again. Chapter 614 water cascaded from the showerhead. Her delicate body as white as jade, her silhouette as beautiful as a painting. Her curves wildly enticing. The last time Kiran returned, he saw Yvonne in the mirror, enjoying a clear view of her front and back, truly a feast for the eyes. This time it was just her back, yet equally enchanting and sensual, capable of driving any man to distraction. If it were snow, Kiran would willingly transform into a wolf to follow her forever. However, the figure before him was Yvonne. Standing in the doorway, clad only in underwear, Kiran felt awkward. He was, after all, a man. A normal man. Pretending to have just noticed Kiran's entrance, Yvonne quickly turned around, a bit tense. She looked at him, her lips slightly parted, her face blushing as she said, You're back. Kiran hurriedly covered himself with his hand, but he soon realized a more embarrassing predicament. She walked up to him without any embarrassment. Her demeanor was natural, her gaze tempting, her body strikingly provocative. He swiftly turned his head away, apologizing. Sorry, I didn't know you were showering. Yvonne, unable to suppress a giggle at his reaction, teased, Look at you, acting as if you're afraid I might take advantage of you. Kiran internally admitted his apprehension, feeling the urge to escape the awkwardness. I'm done. It's your turn now. Yvonne boldly grabbed a towel without wrapping it around herself and sauntered towards the door with a sway in her step. Kiran, making an effort to avert his gaze, stepped aside to let her pass. As Yvonne brushed past Kiran, she smiled, remarking on her undeniable allure. It seems I still have quite the charm. She couldn't help but sneak a glance at a certain spot. Kiran swiftly entered the shower, simultaneously lifting his hand to push Yvonne out. Of course, he didn't touch her smooth skin. He merely used his internal force to push her out. Giggling, Yvonne casually closed the door from outside, her laughter trailing through. Kiran quickly stepped under the shower, turning it to cold water, dousing himself to regain composure. After a full 5 minutes under the cold shower, his masculine thoughts finally subsided, and he cooled down. A glint of realization dawned in Kiran's eyes. He understood why these coincidental encounters with Yvonne kept happening. Looking towards the door, he muttered to himself, "So, you arranged this on purpose? You realized, huh?" Yvonne, pushing the door open, looked at Kiran with a face full of smiles, asking. Kiran remembered he forgot to lock the door and quickly turned around. "Get out. But you've seen me, so it's only fair I see you too," Yvonne teased. "Yvonne, you used the bond of the love spell, anticipated my return, and deliberately tempted me. Do you find it amusing?" Kiran's voice carried anger and accusation. "Should I just watch you ignore me?" Yvonne wasn't upset. Instead, she crossed her arms in front of her, looking at Kiran as if admiring an art piece, continuing, "I can never be with another man in this lifetime. If we are together, you're my everything. If you don't love me, then I'll love you. When Snow Xander was here, I had no chance. Now that she's not, wouldn't I be a fool if I don't make an effort?" Kiran fell silent, unsure how to respond. "Kiran, I'm not a green tea bitch." Yvonne's face blushed shyly. "Before you returned to Bayville and before we met, I was a proud and cold woman. But in front of you now, I want to be proactive and bold like Serena, passionately pursuing you." Kiran thought of Serena. Indeed, she was such a woman. This boldness, he realized, was characteristic of Maui women. Only they could be so passionate and daring. "I understand. Please leave." Kiran didn't scold her but spoke firmly. "Fine." Yvonne felt somewhat disappointed with Kiran's non-acceptance. Kiran was increasingly puzzled by the love spell. What was its purpose initially? He shelved his thoughts, focusing on finishing his shower. When he came out, Yvonne was already dressed in a black puffer jacket that looked too large and bulky. Yvonne raised her eyebrows at Kiran, her pale face breaking into a smile, patting her belly. "Do I look like I'm a few months pregnant?" Kiran smiled and shook his head, unable to entertain her question. "You're at fault for not expanding the York family tree quickly. You're letting down the York family," Yvonne provocatively said. Kiran felt frustrated hearing this. How could this be blamed on him? The dual female love spell. This would mean being with two women at the same time. Even without Snow Xander, such an arrangement would be illegal, wouldn't it? Seeing Kiran's frustration, Yvonne ceased teasing, picking up his clothes instead. "Husband, how about letting your wife help you dress?" Kiran shook his head again, refusing. "I can manage on my own." Yvonne laughed like a bell, turned on the TV, and lay on the sofa, paying no further attention to Kiran. Kiran took his clothes and went to the room to change. 5 minutes later, Kiran came out, noting it was already past 6 p.m. "There's a banquet organized by Mysticor Enterprise at the Seasons Hotel tonight. Are you coming?" he asked. "Of course." Yvonne rubbed her slightly deflated stomach. "I haven't eaten all day." Ignoring Yvonne's coquettish behavior, Kiran simply nodded. "Then let's go." Yvonne winked at Kiran, her face full of flirtatious smiles, and stepped forward to cling to Kiran's arm. This time, Kiran didn't push her away. They left the villa without a car, strolling towards the outside. Yvonne leaned into Kiran, her eyes filled with happiness and sweetness. For her, this was precious time spent with Kiran, cherished in her heart. Kiran, however, was preoccupied with thoughts of what would come after dealing with Liongate, and whether Imperial Dragon would seek revenge with full force. He hoped for an early opportunity to avenge the York family. Was what Finn Ludwig said about the Power Hub Investment Group and the Ludwig family true? He needed verification. And Yvonne, if she wasn't the second daughter of the Ludwig family, then where was the Ludwig family's second daughter? And who was Yvonne? Kiran's mind was in turmoil as they walked, hardly focused. Suddenly, the sound of a rapidly approaching engine came from behind. They were startled. This was Fawkes Hill Villa, where speed limits were enforced. Who would drive so recklessly? Kiran quickly pulled Yvonne aside, dodging a speeding white sports car that zoomed past them and disappeared from view. Kiran's expression changed slightly, wondering which young heir was being so reckless. Yvonne, however, enjoyed Kiran's protective gesture and said nothing. They headed to the Seasons Hotel. Arriving, they found the entrance adorned with a red carpet, bustling with people, and the ground decorated with a huge heart-shaped arrangement of red roses, brilliantly vibrant. Chapter 615. Yvonne looked at Kiran. Look, everyone's being so romantic, and you've never done anything like that for Snow, let alone for me. After listening to Yvonne's tender voice and her tone of mild resentment, Kiran smiled and shook his head. He wasn't unromantic, it was just that his mind was too burdened with pressing matters. Indeed, these burdens made him cherish his moments with Snow even more. Only with her could he truly relax and feel genuinely happy. Seeing Kiran silent, Yvonne felt a bit disappointed and fell silent herself. Yvonne and Kiran stood aside, curious about who was proposing and just as eager to see what was happening. With her hair elegantly updo, Shuri exuded a calm and graceful aura. White heart-shaped earrings dangled from her sensuous earlobes, shining like beams of moonlight under the lights. She was dressed in a purple evening gown that hugged her seductive figure perfectly, making her stunningly beautiful. The gown revealed her shoulders and a large expanse of her snowy white, delicate neck, enhancing her mature charm. Her pace was leisurely, but the hem of her gown swept over the red carpet like a floating mist, particularly eye-catching. A pair of golden high heels peeked out from under her long gown, revealing her slender toes. Although Shuri was not a one-in-1,000 beauty, she was certainly a gem among hundreds. Now, adorned in such a gown, she appeared nobly distinguished and elegant, possessed of an extraordinary aura. As the organizer of tonight's banquet, she was undoubtedly the brightest star of the event, now dazzlingly beautiful as she greeted guests at the door. However, in Shuri's eyes there was only Kiran, the man who fascinated her, yet felt nothing for her. Still, she had to respectfully welcome him, for he was the man she revered most. You ask how deep my love for you is, how true my love for you is. The moon represents my heart. At that moment, elegant music began to play. With the rhythm of the music, everyone saw a white sports car door open, and a man dressed in a white suit, holding flowers and looking dashing, stepped out. Kiran looked at the man approaching in his 20s, with a long face and glasses, appearing quite decent. The only off-putting aspect was his fierce and arrogant eyes. The man walked towards Shuri. Is he proposing to Shuri? Yvonne nudged Kiran's side, whispering, If you don't stop this, Shuri will become someone else's woman. Kiran glared at Yvonne. She and I have no relationship, but she has deep feelings for you. Recalling the way Shuri looked at Kiran, Yvonne couldn't resist teasing him. Just as Kiran was about to speak, the crowd erupted in cheers. Wow! Isn't that young Master Yates? It's young Master Yates, the one who just returned from overseas. The son of the Lions Club's president, Rory Yates, young Master Yates. Some people recognized the man and began to cheer loudly. Initially, Kiran didn't care much. He and Shuri were just passing by each other. However, upon hearing that the man was Rory Yates, the son of the Lions Club president, his gaze turned icy and withdrawn. Jealous, are you? Yvonne, knowing the reason, deliberately teased Kiran in a low voice. Kiran didn't respond, but just watched the people shouting and calling out. Upon hearing people recognize him, Rory wore an even prouder expression, releasing a mix of fierceness and arrogance, as if all the people before him were beneath him. The Lions Club had been in Fawkes for many years, and Rory had grown accustomed to receiving respect in Fawkes City from a young age. This wasn't always the case. He was once a low-key child, but that changed when he fell for a girl for the first time. Another admirer of the girl, jealous of Rory, challenged him to a duel. Influenced by his father from a young age, Rory, possessing a heroic spirit, agreed to the duel, only to find it was not a fair fight but an ambush by a group, including members of the Silver Lions Club, a branch of the Lions Club. Unaware of Rory's identity, they assaulted him, leaving the young heir unexpectedly beaten by his father's subordinates. Enraged, Rory's father, Max Yates, ordered Joe Queen to investigate, discovering the attackers were indeed their men. Further investigation revealed that the assailant's mother had an affair with a minor leader of the Silver Lions Club, prompting the attack. In a fit of rage, Joe brought the culprits before Max Yates and his son, letting Rory decide their punishment. Then, just a teenager, Rory ordered the attacker's legs broken, personally breaking the limbs of his rival. This incident showcased his ruthlessness, shocking many, including his father, who, though taken aback, saw it as a sign of strength, like father, like son. Since then, Rory began living a carefree life in Phoenix City, maintaining his image by never getting his hands dirty. 3 years ago, he left Fawkes City to study abroad, and everyone seemed to forget about him until now, with his sudden proposal drawing everyone's curiosity about the woman he intended to marry. Hearing Rory's name and seeing him, Shuri halted in her tracks. The first girl Rory ever fell for was Shuri. After crippling his classmate, he confessed to Shuri, who found his actions terrifying and warned him she would rather die than be bullied by him. Young Rory, still harboring romantic notions of love, didn't act rashly but persisted in pursuing Shuri, who, overwhelmed, proposed that if he returned from studying abroad, she would marry him. A promise made in desperation. When she heard he was going abroad for 3 years, she scoffed, thinking it was a mere show, never imagining it had anything to do with her. After all, he had been involved with countless women over the years. But she never dreamed they would meet again today. Under such grand circumstances, he was proposing to her. Her heart sank to its lowest point. Chapter. Rory's gaze landed on Shuri, the fierceness in his eyes dissolving into tenderness and deep affection. "Shuri!" He called out her name with such emotion, as if traversing mountains and rivers through time, arriving in front of her, calling out lovingly and yearning for eternal companionship. Hearing this call, Shuri felt not warmth but a shiver run through her, a vague fear filling her mind. Could he truly be proposing to her? "Do you remember our promise from 10 years ago?" Rory asked again, filled with deep emotion. Shuri trembled slightly, her entire being tense with anxiety. He was indeed here for her, for that promised commitment. What could she do? That promise was made years ago merely to distance herself from him, yet he took it to heart. Remembering Rory's personality made her hair stand on end. 10 years ago, you said you would marry me when I returned from studying abroad." As Rory spoke, his emotions slightly wavered. "A decade has passed, and I've returned from my studies. Can you keep your promise and marry me?" With that, he knelt on one knee, holding out flowers, his eyes filled with undying love. Everyone around reacted. Young Master Yates truly keeps his word. "Marry young Master Yates!" The crowd cheered and applauded, cries of "Marry young Master Yates!" echoing louder and louder. Rory gazed at Shuri, waiting for her nod of agreement. In his view, loving Shuri, respecting her decisions, and fulfilling his promise exemplified true manhood, a real man's courage. He believed himself to be such a man, one that anyone would love and truly cherish, Shuri being no exception. Especially given his status and success, countless women would willingly throw themselves at him. Shuri wouldn't refuse. At this moment in his eyes, Shuri should be deeply moved, then rush into his arms for a tight embrace, a romantic kiss, vows of eternal love. Rory, Shuri stammered, interrupting his thoughts. Hearing Shuri call out, Rory thought she was just shy and nervous. His smile deepened, filled with even more affection. "Shuri!" I'm not ready to marry yet," Shuri managed to say, her gaze inadvertently slipping towards Kiran. For some reason, ever since meeting Kiran, it seemed like she unconsciously compared every man to him, an uncontrollable comparison. Rory, fully focused on Shuri, missed her glance. He smiled. "You promised 10 years ago, and I've kept that promise. Do we have a new promise now?" His voice was not angry, but full of gentle acceptance, demonstrating a man's broad-mindedness and care. His words and demeanor moved many women present. "Young Master Yates is so gracious. He truly loves Shuri. He's a wife-doting demon. I'm so envious. Shuri is so lucky." The infatuated voices of women filled the air, increasing the pressure on Shuri as she faced Rory's unwavering gaze, waiting for her answer. "Agree to Rory!" Someone in the crowd shouted. "Agree to Rory!" The call echoed throughout the venue, with waves of sound that were emotionally stirring. Shuri's cheeks flushed even redder, her nervousness intensifying, unsure of how to respond. Not hearing her agreement, the crowd started to chant in unison, their voices growing louder and more insistent. Rory suddenly raised his hand to silence them, sternly stating, "Shut up!" Thinking Rory was about to get angry, the crowd quickly fell silent. "No one can pressure Shuri," Rory warned authoritatively, his gaze softening again as he looked back at Shuri, filled with tenderness and affection. "Wow!" The crowd was impressed yet dared not speak again. Still, the thought of Rory's status and how many women would willingly throw themselves at him, especially when he could change women every night, made them envy Shuri even more for receiving such deep affection. Many women looked at Shuri with inexplicable curiosity, wondering what charm she possessed to make Rory so devoted. Seeing Rory's attitude and envy from the crowd, Shuri grew even more anxious. Regardless of Rory's past reputation, his feelings for her and the respect he showed were unparalleled. At this moment, there was no pretense or falsity in his demeanor. However, her heart was already with Kiran. Facing Rory, who was smiling and looking at her affectionately, Shuri had a sudden idea. "Rory, my parents are currently unconscious, and I can't calm down to think about this." Hearing this, Rory paused, then showed a compassionate smile. "That's easy to handle. I'm a medical student. I can help treat your uncle and aunt. If my medical skills aren't enough, I can ask my mentor to help." Rory's eager offer stunned the crowd with his devotion. Shuri hadn't expected him to be a medical student, making her even more nervous. What should she do? She glanced at Kiran and recalled Sawyer Sinfield's comments about Aurora Sinfield and Kiran's marriage situation. She added, "Rory, I can only consider my situation after my parents wake up and my sister's marriage is settled." "Your sister and her fiancé situation?" Rory asked, puzzled by the explanation. "Yes, my sister has been engaged since she was young. Her matter needs to be resolved first." Shuri would do anything to find reasons to refuse Rory. Rory, sensing her reluctance, still genuinely wanted to win over the first woman he had ever liked, so he nodded. "That's fine. Let's first focus on awakening your foster parents." Shuri felt a slight touch of respect and tolerance from Rory, which moved her. Yet, knowing she couldn't decide alone, she turned to Kiran. "Mr. Kiran, regarding my parents' illness, what do you think?" She left her question hanging, seeking his opinion. Her question drew everyone's attention, including Rory's. Chapter 617. In a white suit, handsome and dashing, Kiran stood there with a natural elegance, a true Adonis. The women on site couldn't help but gasp in amazement. To Rory, Kiran's presence was particularly irksome, especially since they were dressed similarly, and Kiran appeared even more stylish. When Rory's gaze fell on Yvonne's beautiful face, her frail appearance seemed to evoke a protective instinct, something that Rory, as a typical playboy, felt even more strongly. Rory was envious, jealous, and resentful upon seeing Kiran and Yvonne together, an uncontrollable feeling for him. "Young Master York," Shuri called out again, not hearing a response from Kiran. "Young Master York?" Hearing this title again, Rory felt a pang of annoyance. Kiran was also observing Rory, the son of the Lions Club president. He had already marked Rory as a target. Yet Rory's behavior was unexpected. He lacked the typical arrogance of a young master, showing a semblance of gentlemanly demeanor instead. Of course, Kiran knew this was just a facade. The fierce look in Rory's eyes revealed his cruel nature. Kiran, having figured this all out, told Shuri, "Your parents' illness cannot be cured now." He paused, then emphasized, "And without my permission, no one can treat your parents." "Okay, young Master York." Shuri agreed obediently, her agreement stemming from complete trust in Kiran. For Rory, however, Shuri's acquiescence was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. Frustrated that his proposal was being delayed due to her family issues, and now Kiran declaring that the illness required his consent, Rory burst out angrily at Kiran. "Who the hell do you think you are?" His outburst changed the atmosphere instantly. Many who had just praised Rory started to back away, knowing he was angered. Worried about a conflict between Kiran and Rory, Shuri quickly said, "Rory, don't be angry. If it weren't for young Master York, my parents might have." "Shuri, don't be sad." Rory's voice softened again, filled with tenderness, a stark contrast to his attitude towards Kiran. "I hope Rory won't make this difficult for me," Shuri seized the opportunity to say. Rory, struggling to maintain his composure for Shuri's sake, asked Kiran coldly, "So, how do you propose to treat them?" Kiran reassessed Rory. Hypocrite. Despite being furious, he was trying to appear gentlemanly in front of Shuri. Kiran dismissed him outright. If Shuri ended up with him, she'd likely be discarded cruelly after the novelty wore off. "How to treat them is my concern, not yours," Kiran responded coolly. "You can't cure them, and you're saying others aren't allowed to cure them either." Rory's face darkened. "If I can't cure it, nobody can," Kiran answered with unwavering confidence. "Ha!" Rory couldn't help but sneer. "Could you be any more arrogant?" He turned to Shuri. "I am now a graduate from the renowned medical university in N country, specializing in neurosurgery, and my mentor is the world-famous Bronte." "You're Bronte's student?" Shuri was somewhat surprised. She had looked up information during the time the Sinfields were unconscious and knew of this Bronte, a well-known figure. Hearing that Shuri recognized Bronte made Rory even more arrogantly confident. He nodded and said, "Yes, I am Bronte's last student. After me, he no longer took on any students." Shuri was taken aback by this revelation, not expecting Rory to have such an opportunity in medical study. Rory looked at Kiran proudly. "I don't know where you graduated from, but when it comes to treating neurological diseases, whether it's my medical skill or my mentor's, we can definitely cure it. So I hope you won't interfere." Trying to maintain a good image in front of Shuri, he spoke very politely. "Your medical skill is amazing?" Kiran smiled. "Ha!" Rory sneered. "Not just amazing, but extremely powerful. My teacher is even more so. The world-famous actress Alice's brain tumor was also removed by him. He's known as the world's #1 neurosurgeon and is even a hopeful for today's Nobel Prize in medicine." The surrounding crowd gasped in awe. Discovering Bronte's identity shocked everyone, and they looked at Rory with newfound admiration. Previously, if fear was due to identity, now respect was due to capability. As Bronte's last disciple, one could imagine just how skilled Rory must be. With the backing of the powerful Lions Club and having such an impressive mentor, returning from abroad with a qualification, Rory now truly appeared as a prodigy in everyone's eyes. Hearing the gasps of awe, Rory stood even prouder, looking at Kiran. "What do you have to say now?" Shuri also looked at Kiran, hoping for a solution since her parents' illness was paramount. Kiran had treated them without success, so it would be welcome if Rory could cure them. Yet she couldn't say this out loud, and her admiration for Kiran remained strong. "Do you love Shuri?" Kiran asked with a smile, his demeanor indifferent. "Yes." Rory turned to Shuri. "I will love you for the rest of my life, through life and death." Shuri was taken aback, but more concerned about whether her parents' illness could be cured and if Kiran would agree. "If Shuri was going to die soon, would you still marry her?" Kiran asked Rory. "Shut up." Rory was furious, feeling insulted. "You have no right to slander Shuri." Kiran shook his head. "I'm not slandering. Shuri has a tumor in her brain and won't live longer than a year, maybe not even 3 months. Chapter 618. A brain tumor, not living more than 3 months. These 2 sentences shocked everyone, filling their eyes with terror and disbelief. Was the beautiful and enchanting woman going to die? Was a woman in the prime of her life going to die? Even Shuri herself was terrified, her body trembling and her face pale. Ha ha ha. Rory was the first to react, laughing in rage and looking at Kiran with a mix of ferocity and vulnerability. "You really are a liar, scaring Shuri like this, deliberately frightening me. Do you really think we're all fools?" "Humph!" Rory snorted, the anger bubbling in his eyes. "Let me tell you, Rory is not someone who scares easily." He was truly enraged. Cursing Shuri to death was like cursing himself. Kiran ignored Rory, instead asking Shuri, "Do you often feel dizzy, have low blood pressure, and rely on drinking brown sugar water to nourish your body?" Shuri's face changed again. How did Kiran know? A thought flashed through her mind. Could Kiran have known from seeing her water cup in her office? She looked at Kiran, not speaking, but her expression was full of surprised inquiry. "You often have insomnia at night, and the right side of your head, especially the lower third, often feels swollen and numb. And you can only sleep on your left side, lying on your side," Kiran continued. Shuri couldn't help but cover her mouth with her hand, startled by the accuracy. How could Kiran know? She had never shared her bedroom habits, and Kiran had never stayed over at their house. Father Larson was too honest to have spied on her. Was this some sort of witchcraft? Kiran then turned to Rory. "What do you think her condition is?" Rory was thoroughly confused, especially hearing about her condition for the first time. Seeing Rory's silence, Kiran prodded. "Care to explain it to Shuri?" "Rory, I indeed have such a condition. Do you know what's causing it?" Shuri couldn't wait to speak out, asking Rory for an explanation. Rory's expression went through several changes, ending in an awkward attempt to reassure her. "Shuri, don't listen to him rambling. It's not serious." Shuri became even more anxious. "Rory, just explain the cause to me. I'm very nervous." Now, she was genuinely afraid. If she really had only 3 months to live, wouldn't she be as good as dead? "Shuri, really, don't listen to his nonsense. He's just bluffing to scare you," Rory continued. Yvonne chuckled. "What it is doesn't matter. What's important is you clear up Shuri's doubts." After Yvonne finished speaking, she looked around. "I believe that's what everyone wants to know, right?" Everyone nodded, eager to know. Kiran's description of Shuri's condition had piqued their curiosity, and Rory's academic credentials and mentor had shocked them even more, so naturally. They all wanted to know the truth. Rory stood there, suddenly feeling nervous and embarrassed. What real knowledge did he have? He had no real knowledge or skills. He was just a rich second generation who managed to become a disciple of Bronte because of his willingness to spend money and pull strings. Initially, Bronte had high hopes for him, hoping he would become a renowned doctor, and taught him earnestly. However, it soon became clear that Rory was not cut out for it. Moreover, Rory's actions tarnished Bronte's reputation, leading him to angrily declare he would no longer take on students. Bronte was utterly frustrated with Rory as a student. Now Rory was brazenly claiming to be an outstanding student of Bronte. Nobody knew the truth, but now, with his beloved being pointed out as ill, he couldn't say anything. That was not only embarrassing but also mocking to him. Rory was anxious, attempting to speak several times but failing, his face extremely unattractive. "You can't cure her illness, but you can talk about the condition, right?" Kiran asked Rory, smiling mockingly. Hearing he couldn't cure the illness, Rory was indeed aggrieved. His expression changed several times, and finally he looked coldly at Kiran. "You're just lying. Shuri has no illness." He looked up at Shuri. "Don't be fooled by him. Many scammers out there scare people and then cheat them out of money. I suspect this person is one of those scammers." Rory sneered at Yvonne. "You're the real patient here. You look like a sick woman." He then addressed the crowd. "If this Mr. Kiran is really as skilled as he claims, why can't he cure the woman by his side? Don't be deceived by him." The crowd, hearing this, showed sudden realization, looking at Kiran with a hint of doubt, as if they also didn't believe Shuri's diagnosis. "Rory, since you're so confident Shuri isn't ill, how about we make a bet?" Kiran proposed. "What bet?" Rory asked, his voice deep. "We bet 200 billion. If Shuri has a brain tumor, you give me 200 billion. If she doesn't, I give you 200 billion. What do you say?" Kiran asked. 200 billion? Rory questioned, his heart tumultuous. Even as the son of the Lions Club's leader, he didn't have 200 billion. He didn't want to admit he didn't have the money and scoffed. "Do you think it's play money? You're just throwing around 200 billion? I don't believe you can come up with 200 billion. The issue isn't whether I can or cannot, but whether you dare or not," Kiran said coldly. 200 billion is nothing, Yvonne interjected, her face full of derision. Rory looked coldly at Kiran, trying to figure out who he really was. "Afraid, are you?" Yvonne, now aggressive, looked at Rory. "If you doubt Kiran doesn't have the money, I can guarantee it. If he loses and doesn't have the money, I'll cover the debt." A collective gasp rose from the crowd, their eyes wide with shock and awe. No one expected them to be so determined to make the bet. Now, Rory was seen as the one afraid to bet. All eyes turned to him, eager to see his decision. Rory, never one to back down, was provoked. "Fine, let's bet. If you lose and can't pay, I'll take your life." Kiran's tone was calm but menacing. "My life," Rory scoffed, thinking of the Lions Club's backing. Kiran didn't elaborate. "You're responsible for arranging the hospital checkup. Don't we need to write an agreement?" Rory inquired. "No need with so many witnesses," Kiran replied. Rory thought it made sense. He could still deny it if he lost. "I'll contact the hospital," he said, immediately making a call. Chapter 619. Rory dialed the phone, simply stated his identity, and made a request before hanging up. The whole process was done with such a casual and natural flair. In less than half an hour, the neurosurgery team from Fawkes City Hospital arrived at the scene with their equipment. Those who had just heard Rory make the call were shocked to see the hospital staff promptly responding, and some even began to flatter him, saying, "Young Master Yates speaks with such authority. In Fawkes, there's nothing young Master Yates can't handle. Young Master Yates never loses a bet." A chorus of flattery ensued. Rory, initially in a foul mood, began to feel better. A smug and proud expression appeared on his face. He was confident he wouldn't lose this bet. Betting against him was foolish. On the other hand, Kiran remained calm, the only change in his expression being a desire to laugh. It was indeed a coincidence that the doctor who had come from the hospital was the same one who had declared Archie Campbell dead yesterday. He stayed in the background. After all, medical examinations were usually a grim affair best left to others. Seeing Kiran staying back, Rory did the same, not wanting to lose the dignity of his status. The doctor, however, took the initiative to come forward and fawn over him, introducing himself. "Young Master Yates, I'm Dr. Huang." Rory was somewhat pleased by the proactive flattery and nodded, instructing, "Dr. Huang, please check Shuri Caden's head." "Right away," Dr. Huang quickly agreed. He had rushed over almost immediately upon the hospital director's orders, hearing it was at the request of Rory, the son of the Lions Club's chairman. Hearing Rory's command, Dr. Huang quickly got his team to set up their equipment. The hospital director wasn't worried about potential damage to the equipment, so why should he be? Naturally, his actions were swift. Once ready, he turned to Rory with a smile plastered on his face, reporting, "Young Master Yates! We're all set." Rory nodded slightly and turned to Shuri. "Shuri, go get checked to avoid being deceived by quacks." Shuri nodded. "All right, Rory." At this moment, Shuri's mind was a whirlwind of confusion, unsure if she was indeed ill, having never undergone a checkup before. "This way, please." Seeing Rory being polite to Shuri, Dr. Huang invited her with even greater courtesy. Shuri lay on the CT scan bed, trying her best to stay calm. Dr. Huang personally operated the machine for the examination. Given it was Rory's arrangement, he was very thorough and even did additional scans after noticing some abnormalities in the brain. After completing the examination, he turned off the machine, printed out the images, and, after a careful review, confirmed there was indeed a brain tumor. Thinking of how Rory cared for Shuri, their relationship must be special. His face tensed up as he quickly approached Rory, saying, "Young Master Yates, this lady indeed has a brain tumor." Hearing this, Rory's head buzzed. There really is a tumor? And it's inoperable. "I estimate at most she has a year to live, perhaps only a few months," Dr. Huang added, eager to demonstrate his medical expertise. Rory felt as if his head had suddenly grown much larger, instinctively turning to look at Kiran. How could he be so accurate? Did he have X-ray vision? He had lost the bet. The people around, hearing this, also turned their gaze towards Kiran, their eyes filled with disbelief. Following the crowd's gaze, Dr. Huang couldn't help but shudder at the sight of Kiran. The swelling on his face from Steve Wagner's beating was still painful. Rory didn't want to admit defeat and glared at Dr. Huang with a dark expression, coldly stating, "Your equipment is inaccurate. The results are incorrect." Dr. Huang was stunned by the accusation and looked at Rory, confused by what he meant. "Take your equipment and leave or I'll have it smashed." Rory's voice turned icy. Dr. Huang turned pale with fear, realizing this wasn't the outcome Rory wanted. "So, Rory, you refuse to admit you've lost." Kiran stepped forward with a smile, breaking the tension. "Lost?" Rory scoffed. "I haven't lost. The problem lies with the equipment, not me." He then turned to Dr. Huang, pressuring him. "Your equipment is faulty, isn't it?" Rory's logic was simple. Pressure Dr. Huang into agreeing with him, or else it would be equivalent to seeking his own downfall. "Rory, if you're trying to weasel out of paying the 200 billion bet, just say it. There's no need to embarrass yourself like this." Kiran's mocking tone laid bare the situation, sparing no feelings. "Kiran, I'm not trying to dodge the bet. It's just that the results from their equipment aren't accurate," Rory retorted. He knew his status could intimidate many, but he didn't want to be accused of not acknowledging his defeat. His gaze swept warningly over Dr. Huang and the onlookers, silencing them. The bystanders quickly lowered their heads, not daring to speak, wanting to distance themselves from the matter. Dr. Huang, holding the scan results, was in a quandary. He had already announced the findings, and there was Kiran. "Dr. Huang, are these results accurate?" Kiran asked, just as Dr. Huang thought of him. Dr. Huang became even more nervous. Rory's gaze, venomous as a snake's, was fixed on Dr. Huang, full of warning. Everyone looked at Dr. Huang, wondering how he would respond to this unlucky predicament. In their eyes, he must support Rory or face repercussions. Sweat broke out on Dr. Huang's forehead. Kiran was someone even Steve Wagner tried to please, and Steve was Gordon Sutton's brother-in-law, practically Fawkes royalty. Rory was the son of the Lions Club chairman, a significant figure in Fawkes' civilian circles. Behind both men stood figures akin to royalty in the heavens. Dr. Huang couldn't afford to offend either. What was he doing here if not courting death? Dr. Huang was filled with regret, almost to the point of tears. Rory didn't expect Dr. Huang to hesitate and choose, growing displeased. He glanced coldly at Dr. Huang, impatiently saying, "Dr. Huang, what are you thinking about? Answer me." Dr. Huang was trembling, caught between a rock and a hard place, unsure how to face this situation. "Did you hear me?" Rory's anger exploded. Startled, Dr. Huang shivered, but his mind suddenly cleared. Offending Kiran could mean more than just being fired today. He might even get arrested, given the bribes he had accepted. Biting the bullet, Dr. Huang started, "Young Master Yates, you're saying the results are incorrect?" Thinking Dr. Huang would comply, Rory smirked with a mix of reminder and warning. "The results are accurate," Dr. Huang finally blurted out, swallowing nervously. Caught up in his thoughts, Rory didn't immediately grasp the significance and turned to Kiran. "You've lost, you." Mid-sentence, Rory realized what had been said and furiously turned back to Dr. Huang. "What did you say?" He raised his hand to slap Dr. Huang, but was interrupted. "He said you've lost." Kiran's voice rang out as he grabbed Rory's hand. Dr. Huang exhaled a sigh of relief, quickly running to hide behind Kiran. With his hand caught by Kiran, Rory calmed down but couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. Chapter 620. "I've lost?" Rory Yates looked at Kiran with a cold smile, asking, "What have I lost?" Rory's tone was proud and his expression smug. "You lost a bet of 200 billion. Kiran knew he was trying to wriggle out of the debt. "I've lost 200 billion? Rory scoffed, looking around at the crowd, his eyes questioning as if to say he was unaware of such a bet. Everyone present knew Rory was attempting to dodge the debt. Considering the astronomical figure of 200 billion, even as the son of the Lions Club chairman, it was doubtful he could produce such an amount. Thus, everyone lowered their heads, pretending not to hear, distancing themselves from the situation. Seeing that not a single person was willing to vouch for Kiran, Rory lifted his hand and swatted Kiran's hand away, arrogantly stating, "I didn't bet with you." There was no agreement, no arrangement. Rory, hands behind his back, spoke with full arrogance. "Besides, how could a poor loser like you have 200 billion? You don't even have 200 billion to your name, yet you bet that amount with me? You're scamming." Rory exuded a dominating coldness, seemingly the victim of a scam instead. The crowd looked at Kiran. Those who didn't know him had pity in their eyes. To them, Confronting a haughty figure like Rory was akin to seeking death. Should the Lions Club get angry, Kiran might well end up as lion dung tomorrow. Feeling the adoring gaze of the crowd, Rory was pleased, arrogantly saying to Kiran, "I now suspect you're trying to extort me, so I have a demand." He pointed at Yvonne, "Give this woman to me, and today's matter will be considered settled." "Okay?" Yvonne didn't wait for Kiran to speak, surprisingly agreeing on her own accord. She stepped towards Rory, her beautiful face smiling seductively, saying flirtatiously, "I just love handsome young men like you." Her fair hand reached out towards Rory's face. Rory was delighted seeing Yvonne take the initiative. When her hand touched his face, he felt the coldness of her hand. It sent a shiver through his body and filled it with excitement. He reached out to grab Yvonne's hand, but she had already returned to Kiran's side. "Honey, just wait to collect the money." Rory's empty hand hung in the air. His expression first surprised, then turned to anger, coldly looking at Yvonne. "Are you playing me?" Yvonne shook her head. "I'm not playing you. Then what is it?" "I'm poisoning you." Yvonne blinked excitedly, appearing very playful. "Poison?" Rory became tense immediately, touching his face, which started to feel numb and swollen. "Ah." He couldn't help but cry out in pain, looking at Yvonne. What kind of poison did you use on MME? "The type of poison isn't important. What's important is, your hand is poisoned too." Yvonne spoke lightly and naturally, her tone teasing. Rory quickly looked at the hand he had used to touch his face, which was also turning black. His entire body broke out in goosebumps, overtaken by fear. You're looking to die." "Well, if I'm going to die, you'll be coming with me, so what do I have to fear?" Yvonne responded with a carefree and natural demeanor. Just you wait." Rory Yates immediately took out his phone and dialed Faber Luther's number. Once the call connected, he shouted into the phone, "Uncle Luther, I've been poisoned at Seasons Hotel. Come save me quick." Faber, upon hearing Rory was poisoned, first thought of the healing prince. "Was it an old man who poisoned you?" "No, a woman. The patient's woman." Faber sighed in relief, glad it wasn't the healing prince. He promptly said, "I'm on my way." Hearing Faber was on his way, Rory felt emboldened and turned to Kiran and Yvonne. "You two just wait, I'll make sure you disappear from Fawkes today." "Young master, mind your image. You were supposed to propose to Shuri, remember?" Yvonne teased. Only then did Rory remember his intention to propose, turning to see Shuri still lying on the CT scanner bed. Already poisoned, he dared not approach and called out, "Shuri!" Shuri, lying there, gave no response, as if she hadn't heard. "Shuri!" Rory rushed over and saw Shuri with her eyes tightly shut, lips sealed, as if she was in a painful coma. Rory grew anxious, wanting to reach out but hesitated, remembering he was poisoned. Her brain tumor ruptured due to the immense mental stress of knowing her condition, causing her to lapse into a coma from the pressure on her nerves. "If she's not treated soon, she'll die," Kiran explained from the side. "You're lying," Rory said, his face showing his nerves, turning to look at Dr. Huang. "What are you standing there for?" "Check her now, eh?" Dr. Huang exclaimed, genuinely confused. "But you said she didn't have a tumor, didn't you?" Rory was on the verge of exploding in frustration. "What else could it be if not a tumor, you idiot?" Rory ran towards Dr. Huang in anger, attempting to grab him. Dr. Huang, seeing Rory was poisoned, hurriedly dodged. "Are you sure it's a tumor?" Kiran asked mockingly. Aye. What's it to you?" Rory retorted, denying again. "It's none of my business, then die for all I care," Kiran said, stepping aside to observe Shuri. Seeing Shuri's complexion grow paler and her eyes tightly shut, Rory knew if she wasn't treated, she'd die. He did have feelings for Shuri, so he gave up and stomped his foot. "Shuri has a brain tumor." "You lost the bet. Pay up!" Yvonne seized the moment, extending her fair hand towards Rory, reiterating her demand. "I didn't bet," Rory flatly denied. "Shuri's illness has nothing to do with us," Kiran said with a smile, standing aside. You. Rory's face twisted in a sneer. "Whether she lives or dies is none of my concern." He gave up entirely. "Don't you love Shuri?" Yvonne asked, her eyes wide in inquiry. "I don't love her anymore," Rory snapped in frustration. "So, your love for Shuri is worth less than a tumor?" Kiran taunted. "What's it to you?" If Rory's face wasn't already black from the poison, it might have turned as red as a shrimp. "That's good, then I can save Shuri," Kiran said, walking over and taking out a silver needle. "You." Rory looked at Kiran in annoyance. "I'm just exposing your fake love," Kiran sneered as the needle dropped. "Rory." Just then, Faber's voice rang out. His gaze fell on Rory's cyanotic, poisoned face, his eyes sharp. "Who poisoned you?" "Uncle Luther, kill this couple for me." Rory pointed at Kiran and Yvonne.